Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Stitch Sessions. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Karen, and as you can tell, my voice is a little bit off today. I went hiking a few days back and it was really windy, and the loss of my voice is a result of that. So I still wanted to go ahead and make a tutorial for you guys today. If you find that my voice is grating, which I would totally understand, you can simply press mute once we start the tutorial. I'm gonna make sure to leave some text up here as well, so you can watch me do it as well as read the text. And hopefully my voice will get back to normal quite soon. So I hope you're all doing great. We're gonna work on a granny motif today. And this motif is, I would say, the most mysterious of all the granny motifs, only because I think there's a lot of interest in it, but not a lot of people tend to do the circular granny. So I've already done one here, and it creates such a pretty effect. You'll see this used a lot in things like flower granny motifs. And generally speaking, the granny motif consists of using clusters of stitches, usually the double crochet stitch. And you can use this for a variety of different things. You can make coasters, hop pads, which actually I'm going to be creating a hop pad or a trivet for the one I'm making here. You can use it to create a cushion or even the bottom of a basket if you want a round basket. Or you can use it, the smaller version, as part of a granny motif for a blanket, which you can then square off. And I'll actually talk about that in another tutorial. Today, I'm really going to focus on the creation of the circle and the base principles of how to create the circle. So those of you that have seen my how to crochet a circle tutorial, it's pretty much the same principle. In order for your work to lie flat, you're going to have to increase the number of stitches with each round. There is one little deviation here with the granny motif that I will talk about when we get to it. If you want to create a larger and larger circle, there will be one little kind of adjustment to that theory. But in the meantime, we are just going to get started, and I'm going to show you how to work the granny circle. Okay, so let's talk about our materials. Okay, so for this tutorial, I'm using some scrap cotton yarn, and this is what I would recommend if you are indeed going to create things like coasters or hot pads. You want a yarn that is heat resistant. Some people even say you can use 80% cotton blend. I always advocate, if you're doing anything that is around heat or moisture, use 100% cotton and you'll never go wrong. So I've got some of the Bernat Handicrafter cotton left over from a few other projects, and I'm very happy to be able to use it for this one. So this is just a swatch, but I happen to be creating a hot pad or a trivet. And I like to, when I'm doing motifs like this, see how it's very airy? I like to create a double layer. So I've already done one side. So I'm going to show you how to do the motif as well as show you how I would put this together in a hot pad. So it's 100% cotton yarn, a variety of different colors I've got here. I would say if you're going to create something like I am, 100 grams should be sufficient, okay? So that's our yarn, okay? And the hook size I'm going to be using today is a 5.5 millimeter hook, which is also known as an I or a size 9, okay? As always, make sure you have a pair of scissors and a darning needle on hand so that you can sew in your ends afterwards. So let's get started on our granny circle. Okay, so I'm going to use this little bit that I have left of this navy blue yarn to create the center. Okay, so just because I only have a little bit of it left. So I know it's dark on camera, but I'm hoping that this one row or one round will not be too cumbersome. So you can certainly start with a chain 5 ring, but I like to do my granny motifs with a cinch circle. So we're going to start by wrapping the yarn around just like that and then pulling it through. And once you've got it through, you want to chain 1 to secure your circle. And there you have your magic ring or your cinch circle. And I always just like to get that tail out of the way. You're then going to chain an additional 3. So we have 1, 2, and 3. So you have a total of 4 chains. This is going to count as a double crochet chain 1. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back into our ring and we're going to place a double crochet stitch. Just like that. Okay. So again, I realize the dark yarn isn't always the best. So you've got your chain 3 plus the chain 1 is a spacer and a double crochet. We're now going to chain 1 and go back into the ring and double crochet again. So what we want to do is create a little bit of spacing between our stitches. So I will chain 1, yarn over and go back into the ring and double crochet. Oops. So you have something that is looking like this. Okay. Oops, let me do that. So you've got technically double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. You're going to do that all the way until you have a total of 12 double crochet stitches to create your first round. So we're creating some spaces there, and your chain 3 will count as a double crochet. So I'm going to leave you there, and this is the only time I'm using this dark yarn, so hopefully it isn't too bad to see. So I'm going to leave you there, and I'm going to finish round 1, and I'll meet up with you for round number 2. Okay, so this is my 12th double crochet, and then I got to make sure I still chain 1. And so now I've got 12. You can see it's created a circle now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that tail, and I'm just going to cinch it shut. Nice and tight. So that cinches the center of my ring. And now I'm going to find the 3rd chain. Remember, I did 4 chains in total. So I'm not sure if you can see with this yarn, but I don't want to go into the 4th chain. I want to go into the 3rd chain and slip stitch to join the round. Just like that. And so your round 1 is now complete. So I've got 12 double crochets all together. So that is what creates, if I spread that out, see? That's what creates our center. So now I'm going to change colors. Of course, you could do yours in a solid color, but I think when working with granny motifs, changing colors really makes the design pop out more. So we're going to snip our yarn. We're done with that. I'm just going to chain 1 here and fasten off. Okay. So then you can weave in your tails. So you can weave in your tails at the end or as you go, however you see fit. Okay. So I'm just going to set that down here just to give you guys a chance to really see how. Okay, let's move on to round number 2. So at the end of round 1, you're going to have 24 stitches. Now in this tutorial, I am not going to count the chain 1s in between just to make things a little easier. So right now we've got 12 double crochets. Let's go on to round number 2. Okay, so for round number 2, I'm going to bring in my other blue color, a little bit lighter. And so what you want to do is you can place a slip knot on your hook. I don't always do that, depending on my mood, and this is one of them. So I'm going to find that space right there, and I am just going to pull the yarn through that space, like that. And I'm going to chain 1 to secure my yarn. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain another 2, sorry. And that chain 3 will count as a double crochet. So now we're going to go back into the same space and we're going to place a double crochet. So now I technically have 2 double crochets coming out of that space. Then what you're going to do is you're going to chain 1 and you're gonna move into the next space, okay? So you can see my tail's there. I'm actually gonna try and work over that tail. And so into that space, I'm gonna place 2 double crochet stitches. So I have 1, and then I have 2, and then chain 1. I'm gonna go into the next space and do the same thing. 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, and then chain 1. Okay, so whereas before we've had 1 double crochet separating everything, now we have 2 double crochets in each of those little sections. So I think I mentioned this before, we're really following the same principles of how to crochet a circle. I'll make sure to leave a link for that tutorial I've already done on that in the description box down below. And this method goes for creating anything circular in nature. So we had 12 double crochets in round 1. And for the end of round 2, we want to end up having 24 double crochets. Remember, I'm not counting the chain 1 in between. So we are now increasing by 12 stitches. And technically that's how much we want to increase with every round we create, okay? So you're just gonna continue doing that. 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochet, chain 1. You're gonna do that into every single space until you come up to the end. Then you'll slip stitch to join. And I'll meet up with you at the end of round 2. Okay, so I've just finished my last cluster of stitches, and I want to chain 1, and I'm going to find the top of that chain 3, which is right there, and I'm going to slip stitch to join. And because I'm changing colors, I'm going to snip off my yarn and just fasten off. Okay, so now you can really see by working in between the stitches creates that pretty kind of pinwheel flower-like effect. So now I've got 24 stitches after round 2. So now we're going to go into round number 3, and I'm going to introduce my next color, which is going to be some of this jute color here. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to find a spot. I always like to kind of go somewhere beside that knot. So now we're working between the clusters, so we're not going in between these stitches. We're going to go in between, we're going to go where the chain 1s are, okay? So I'm going to go right in here. And I'm going to chain 3. Oops. 1, 2, and 3, okay? Now we're going to increase the number of stitches again. So we had 2 double crochets in each space. Now we're going to place 3 double crochets, which is what creates the proper granny shell stitch. So I'm going to place 2 more double crochets in this one because the chain 3 already counts as 1. And then I have 1 more. Okay. So now we have 3 stitches. We will chain 1 and now move into the very next space and do the same thing again. So we have 3 double crochets into our spaces. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and then I'm going to repeat that all the way around, okay? So this, by increasing the number of stitches, that's what helps your round project lay flat. So for round 3, you will end up having 36 stitches in total at the end. So repeat that into every space, and I'll meet up with you at the end of round 3. Okay, so just finishing round number 3 with a slip stitch. I'm going to snip my yarn. Okay, so, whoops. So round 3 is now complete. And you can see it kind of gives off this really pretty flower effect by working between the stitches. Now, if I were going to create this as a coaster, for example, I might stop here. I would definitely stop here if I were going to make this into a square motif as part of a blanket project myself. You could still make it larger, but if you were just doing a coaster or wanting to then eventually square it off, this is a good time to do it because you've got 12 clusters of stitches, and 12 is a great number to square things off, okay? Now, I'm going to keep doing a few more rounds for those of you that eventually might want to do a bigger project. So I'm going to bring in my next color, which is my white. Okay, so round number 4, we're going to start in a space, and again, we're going to bring in our yarn, and you're going to chain 3 as we've done before. 1, 2, and 3. We're still increasing, as always, the number of stitches. So we've done 3 double crochets in the spaces. For round 4, we're going to do 4 double crochets into the space. So the chain 3 counts as 1. So I need to place 3 more in this space. And don't worry, I know you're thinking that's a lot of stitches, but it will all work out. So I'm going to place 3 more. So we have 1, 2, and 3. Just like that. Then you're going to chain 1, go into the next space, and place 4 double crochets in total. So at the end of round 4, we want to have 48 stitches in total. Now, I forgot to mention something at the beginning. We started by creating 12 sections. You can also start it with creating 6 sections if you're going to start off with a smaller motif to begin with. And I'll address that in another project tutorial. But 12 is probably the best number to work with to expand your circle and to change the shape later on if you'd like. You can do it with 6, you just would have to wait a few more rounds before you start squaring off your project. So if you've ever seen anyone do a granny circle and they only start with 6 sections, that is totally doable as well. But I just find for me, I like starting with the 12 sections, okay? So continue on with round number 4, chain 1, and place 4 double crochets into each of your spaces. Okay, so I've completed round 4, and this is the point in time where you might start feeling like it's kind of looking like it's buckling a bit and bunching. And that is quite normal, so you can just press it down. See, it spreads out nicely and it lays flat. Now, this is the point where we are now going to increase our rounds alternately. So we've been increasing from round 1 to round 2, we increased, 2 to 3, we increased, and 3 to 4. For round 5, we are not going to increase our stitches. So we did this technique similarly in our semicircle shawl. If you're following along with our Shawl We Crochet series, in that tutorial, we were doing a semicircle, which we followed the same principles, and there was a point when we started alternating our increase rounds. So for round 5, we're actually technically going to go back now and repeat round 2 in the sense that we're going to go back to using clusters of 2. So from here on out, if you want to create a larger and larger and larger circle, you're technically just going to go back and repeat round 2, 3, and 4. And I'll show you what I mean. So for round 5, I'm actually going to bring in my coral colors, a little accent here. And I'm going to go into this space here. Any space at all actually will do. And I'm going to pull through. And I'm going to chain 3. So we have 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to place one more double crochet into that space. Just like that. So we're going to use clusters of 2. Then I'm going to chain 1, but I'm not going to skip over to the next space like I did before. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in between these 2 stitches here. So see how we have 4 stitches? We're going to go in between. And what this does is this definitely guarantees that we are going to keep the same number of double crochets. But what it will do is it will increase the number of spaces. And the spaces, of course, are what gives us that granny effect, that lacy effect. But we're not increasing the stitches. So, by the way, at the end of round 4, I have a total now of 48 stitches or 48 double crochets. Remember, I'm not counting the chain ones in this case. So in round 5, my goal is to still maintain 48 stitches, okay? So I would chain 1, and now I'm going to go into the space that's here. So I would insert and place 2 double crochets. So that's what I mean by we're going back to repeating round 2 in the sense that we're using clusters of 2. See that? And then chain 1. And now I've come up to my shell of 4 stitches. So I'm going to find this space, a little space in between, in the middle of those 4. And I'm going to insert my 2 double crochets. I'm just trying to work over that tail there. Then I'll chain 1, and now I've got the space to work with, so I place 2 double crochets. And this is what I'm going to repeat all the way to the end, okay? So you can see your work is now going to start to kind of relax a little bit. So whereas previously it was starting to buckle a bit, it's now going to relax. And that is typical of the granny circle because the main principle of the granny motif is to cluster your stitches. And once we start getting into 4 clusters of 4, it's a lot of stitches in one space. And so now all we're doing is we're spreading it out and we're not increasing in round number 5. So go ahead and do that. And then I will take you on to round number 6. Okay, so I've completed round 5 and I still have 48 stitches. So my work is looking like that. Now you can see it's kind of relaxed a little bit, okay? So now we're gonna go on to round 6 and we're gonna go back to increasing. And so we've repeated technically round 2 with the 2 clusters. Now we're gonna repeat round 3 with the clusters of 3, which are our shell stitches. So now we have more spaces to work into, and that's what's going to give us the increase in our stitches. So I'm going to go back to the white, and essentially it's the same thing now. Hopefully it's starting to seem much more familiar to you what needs to happen next. Okay, so you'd insert 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to place 2 more here. So I have 1 and 2. Sometimes that chain 3 can be a little tight in there. So there's 3, chain 1. Now I'm going to go into the next space, which is right there, and place 3 double crochets. So for this next round, you might think, well, if it's 48, then the next round should be a total of 60 stitches. But in fact, it's going to be 72 stitches. So it still maintains the principle of each round will increase in the number of stitches. So because technically it didn't increase here, we increased the number of spaces so that when we placed an increased number of stitches in the increased number of spaces, hopefully that makes sense, it's still maintaining the same integrity of stitch increases. So technically this round here, round number 6, you will end up having 72 stitches. So it's going to be as if round 5 had 60 stitches because of the spaces we have here. Hopefully that makes sense. For those of you that really like to understand the theory of why and how things happen and are created, if it's a little fuzzy and you're just happy following along, just keep following along. The basic principle is that you're going to keep repeating row 2, 3, and 4 in the sets of clusters, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and finish round 6, and then I'm going to do one more round for my hot pad, okay? So here, I ended up doing 7 rounds. So we've got round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's the round we're working on now. And then round 7. So basically for round 7, we're going to repeat round number 3 here. Oops, sorry. Round number 4, where we place 4 double crochets into each space. So if you wanted to continue on and make this kind of like a large round blanket, which I've seen some blankets out there that are done in a circle shape, you would just continue, like I said, repeat 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, and 4. And what you're doing is you're repeating those clusters. Just keep in mind when you go back to repeating round 2, with the clusters of 2, you will work into the space, and in between, see how this one has 4? You would go back and work in between those 2 stitches there. And then you would go back, once you finish this, then you'd go back and just work into regular spaces again. And that's it. That's how you would create your granny circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and finish round 6 and round 7. And if you're interested, I'm going to show you how I put these 2 together to create my trivet. Okay. And if you're happy with just leaving it as is, then you are done. You can make these into doilies as well, or centerpieces, all kinds of things you can do with the granny circle. So I'm going to go ahead and finish mine, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to turn mine into a hot pad. Okay, so I've completed my 7th round of my second granny circle, and I just had enough of that jute color to get me to the end, so I'm very happy. So that's what it looks like. It looks like a nice big flower, very pretty. So now I'm going to take these 2 and I'm going to turn them into a trivet. So I'm going to put the wrong sides facing to each other. See how it sits nicely. I like doing this for things like hot pads and pot holders. It just gives you that extra cushion between your hand and the heat. And most especially because this particular design has a lacy effect, I really want to double layer it. So that's what we're doing. And I'm going to go back and bring my white color in. And what I'm going to do is I am going to stitch these 2 sides together, and I'm going to use the half double crochet stitch, okay? So what I want to do is I'm actually going to work into every stitch now, as opposed to just the spaces. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into this stitch here. I'm going to insert my hook, and I'm going to go into the corresponding stitch right there. Just like that. And then I'm going to pull my yarn through. As always, you can start with a slip knot on your hook. That's totally up to you. And I do sometimes as well, just not this time around. So I'm going to pull that through. And then I like to throw my tail over to lock it in. And I chain 1. So this chain 1's not really going to count as anything. I'm going to go back into that same stitch, and I'm going to place a half double crochet stitch. Just like that, okay? And now I'm going to go into the chain space, or you can go into the chain, doesn't matter. And I'm going to do a half double crochet. So this round will not be increasing in stitches, okay? So we're going to keep the stitch count the same, and all you're going to do is go into every single stitch. Make sure you go in the front pad and the back pad and half double crochet. Okay. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to go into the next stitch, which is right there. And then I'm going to find the corresponding stitch. And I'm going to half double crochet. So you've got something that looks like that. So you will have a little dip down wherever you go into the spaces. So I'm just going to do one more here. This one and this one. And then we've got a chain one space, so we're just going to work into the space. Okay. So that's what's going to bind these two together. And I'm going to do that all the way around. And by the way, at the end of round 7, I have 96 stitches in total. So when I finish my round number 8, so to speak, to sew my two sides together, I'm still going to have 96 stitches, okay? So I'll meet up with you once I've finished sewing my two sides together. Okay, this is future me coming back in here just to give you a little bit of advice. If you find that when you're going in the spaces that it starts to rip a little bit, because remember, we're not supposed to be increasing the number of stitches, and that will happen when you're going into every stitch and the space. So what I experimented with on this side here is only going in the stitches and not going into the space. And I find that that kind of made it a little bit smoother there. So that's not going into the spaces, and this one is going into the spaces, so you can see it's dipping down. So that's just a little bit of a suggestion. If you're not, see how it's a little bit rippling? It's because it's too many stitches inside that space. So I think I'm going to continue on placing one into every single stitch and ignoring the chain stitches. And I think I will be very happy with the end result there. So just a little heads up in case you're encountering that. All right, I'm going to finish sewing up my circle. And here we are, guys, the finished product, my little trivet here. And I just kept it really simple with that half double crochet border. And so now you can see it's the same on both sides. And it's just a little bit thicker, gives it a little bit of extra protection. So I'm really happy with how that came out. It's really, really pretty. You can use whatever color combination you like. So I hope you found this fun and interesting, especially if you've been curious about the circular granny shapes. So what are you going to be using your granny circle for? What types of projects are you going to make? Let me know in the description box. And if you have any questions, like if something was not quite clear, make sure to leave that for me in the description box, or pop me an email as always at info@crochetcrafty.com. And don't forget to visit me on the website and sign up for my monthly newsletter, because I give away a free written pattern every month. And also, some of you have been giving me some requests and suggestions about future projects you'd like to see, or some questions about techniques about projects. Please do continue to keep sending them to me. You can leave those also for me in the description box down below, or email me. It does take me a little bit of time sometimes to get to them, but I do eventually get to them. So if you have any requests, please do send them my way. And as always, you can find me on the socials at Facebook and Instagram at The Stitch Sessions. So I hope you guys have an amazing week, and I look forward to seeing you guys in next week's session. So take good care. Bye-bye.